Hold on a second here. This is always fun. This part of it's always fun. Okay. There we go. I hit the magic button.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is now we just got the Zoom information that this is actually live on stream. This is book coach and author too. Did I get that right? Is it author as well?
Yeah, I'm trying to become an author. I'm still working on actually claiming that title, but
Oh well, then we'll start there. So what's the struggle with the title?
well, I haven't actually finished a book yet. I've started a lot of books. Have I finished writing a book? Not yet. But I'm good at helping other people finish their books.
That's fantastic. We'll get to that part in a bit. But we're going to talk about you first, just because I think that
Okay.
I'm going to try to be encouraging here. So my favorite definition of an author came from Isaac Asimov way back in the day. Asimov basically said that anybody that writes is an author. Doesn't matter what, who, or what, or when, or how. Like you're an author. If you actually put pen to page, you're an author, right? Now, if you get paid for it, you're a professional. But
There you go.
right?
Like I was talking with an author and a woman who has a program that helps people pursue their writing dreams, and she has her people categorized in published and pre-published authors.
That
And I was
works
like,
too.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no, because everybody's an author. Like honestly, like the whole idea that like it's an exclusive group is it's not. Like in terms of if you decide I'm going to tell a story, I'm going to tell an amazing, amazing, amazing story, and you're actually making the effort to tell said amazing story, congratulations, you're an author.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're an author then.
Okay, sure, we'll take it.
You take it, just take it. Yeah, that's right. So author and book coach extraordinaire Trisha Jenn Loehr. Did I get that right?
Lair.
Loehr.
Lair.
All right,
Yes.
Trisha Jenn Loehr, ladies and gentlemen, has joined us on the podcast. She is the final person I got of. I'm going to call it the Suzy Four. I met all four of you at.
Suzy would love that.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing Suzy later this week actually for coffee. We up until some family stuff, we've been making it like a once a month deal. We just hang out and talk just once a month.
Oh, nice. That's so fun.
Well, yeah, no, because it's interesting because what like I being who like just doing what I've done, I've met so many people and just creating connections with people is really good. And but the thing is, what I've noticed doing this is you find that a lot of successful people that are actually going to do this, like that are serious about this, sometimes when you get to the top, it's kind of lonely,
Hmm.
right? Because there's
Yeah, I
not a
could see
lot of
that.
people that are in that same boat. So I would not put myself in Susie Vidori's category of success by any stretch of the imagination. But I've been pursuing my own thing, and she's pursued her own thing, and there's a mutual respect there. I actually wanted her to write more books. Like I'm being very honest with that because she's really good. So there you go. There's me waxing with. Is Susie the one who pre-published and published? By the way.
No, it was another lady I just met named Danica Bloom.
Okay, I meant
Yeah.
Danica. No. So no, I like I said, I actually I categorize authors into three groups. This is the me.
Okay.
Writing for passion, just strictly for passion. Writing but has other thing to pursue living with, or just trying to make or C trying to make this a full career, right? Because every one of them is a different mindset. Like
Hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with any of those mindsets. It's just being honest where you're at with them.
Well, and just being honest about what your goals actually are,
Yeah.
right? And that's a huge conversation to have with people when they're writing is why are you writing this? What are your actual goals? Because then the feedback you would give them is going to be different,
Yeah.
right?
Hello, Miss Jag. Yeah, Jag Trust is going to be one of my guests later this week as well because she was supposed to be today, but I screwed up. Not just with because I at the show tonight we were going to do. So, Miss Jag, thanks for coming on and saying a quick hello. But she'll be on Friday. But yeah, no, like I said, this is like it's the cool thing about writing in general is like anyone can be a writer. Like honestly, it's really what the game's all about is what you do with it.
Exactly, right? And some people are slow writers and they maybe don't always feel like they can claim that title as much, because there's the people who write so fast, and writing is writing. Whether you write 2 words a week or 10,000, you're still writing.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And although I do hope it's, for most people, I do hope it's more than 2 words a week. I mean, I don't know how
I'll be
people.
I flip flop. There are some weeks where I'm like powering out 5, 6, 7,000 words, and then there are weeks where it's like, oh, forgot to even open my document.
Well, no, but that's okay. So right there, so today, like when I'm done here, I have to go get real headphones for later on tonight. That's the first thing I got to do. But the second thing I got to do is I'm working on I'm creating social media content for a show I'm launching next week,
Oh,
right?
cool.
And I have to make sure that episode two is done for is at least ready for review for tomorrow. Because episode three is ironically ready for is already is been in it's been finished and ready for her review for a bit. I just haven't heard back from them yet. So basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get ahead on the episode content
Yeah.
I'm releasing a weekly show. First episode is ready to go. I want to make sure I would like to be at like done episode 4 this week, like they just be done it. So I'm in a nice, comfortable position, and then all I'm doing
Yes.
is right. I want to be comfortable because comfortable is good. We'll see if I get what I want. Because I want to get what I want, but I mean that's pretty much like the goal right now, and so but I mean, that's not writing, right? That's not me writing. That's me doing other things, and I mean, that's normal. Like you can have, and honestly, I would dare say, and this is going to sound very, very controversial. You don't need to write every day to be here.
No,
And
you do not.
yeah,
No, you do not. Not everyone can. And I know there are like huge, big writers out there. I think Stephen King's one of the guys who says, oh, you got to write every day. No, you don't. Like, not everyone can. Not everyone has the ability, the time in their life to do that.
yeah,
Um, Not everyone has just the brain power to do that, right? Like, your brain just doesn't work that way. I know people who they think about a story, they walk, they do whatever for weeks before they ever actually sit down and write.
oh yeah. But I would argue that that's part of the process too. Like I think what I will this is what I will give King. This is where I will say I kind of agree with him. Kind of. You're always working on the project, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're putting pen to paper,
True,
right? Right. That right.
true.
I think you have to if you're serious about it, you have to work on it in some form or fashion. Like so the book I'm getting ready to send out and all that stuff that actually Jag is actually one of my beta readers for. And actually, so far I'm 2-0 when it comes to beta readers so far. They're like they all give me the same feedback. Where's the rest of it? So that's good.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's a good space to be in. And I'm trying to and that's it. So like I'm trying to get all that nailed down. So because I'm waiting for the agent query to open. When it opens, I just want to give it to her. It's like, here we are, it's done, right? So I'm kind of in like a rush, but I'm also working on it for not just that, but also where I want to go with the series when and if I continue it, right? So
Yeah.
right, so I kind of know what book 2 kind of is. Book 3 is in my head right now as an inkling of an idea. It's an
Yeah.
inkling,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's where I'm at too. Yeah. Like, book 1 keeps getting kind of shuffled around just to try and make it work. And book 2 and book 3 they're just sitting back there, just waiting.
They're
And
saying,
yeah.
"Hey, I have another book series." Oh, okay, good. Yeah, yes, Jag. I'm working on it. It's like yeah, it's just about done. I'm literally in the last couple chapters, and then I'm going to do a revision because there's a couple chapters I already know when I wrote them. It's like I rushed this. I wanted to get it down. I rushed this. I
Yeah.
need to get right. There's a couple spots I need to really highlight, and then I'll send it off, and I'll be like, okay, here you go, start to finish. And then I go to the agent. Please accept this so I can
What's
become
your book
rich.
about?
So it's about a former knight. So in my story, the Knights of the Round are evil. They got converted to
Oh,
evil,
okay.
and it's about this former assassin that used to work with them now is trying to kill them all, and then things just get complicated from there.
Interesting. So kind
Yeah.
of a fantasy.
Urban fantasy slash. So I'm a big fan of. Have you ever heard of the Parker novels?
Sounds familiar, but I can't really place it. I
Okay. Have you ever seen the movie Parker with Jason Statham?
think I've seen previews for it.
Okay. Have you? Okay. We'll try one more. Payback with Mel Gibson. That's an older one. Okay.
No.
So there's these crime novels, right? And then I this is so for me, I actually came at this from a completely different angle, but this is what people they're kind of famous crime novels about a dude named Parker, and he's a thief, a thug, kind of like he's not a nice guy, but he's got a code of honor. Like he does things by a certain code, right? He has morals. They're just not our morals exactly, right? So
Hmm.
um but I love that world. I love that kind of concept. So I decided, well, what I could do like my own take on that. And what sold me on that idea was Darwin Cook is a comic book artist. He did
Okay.
a graphic like a novel, but he illustrated it, right? And it looks so badass. I was like, I want this for something like this in my own personal collection of things I've released. That was the whole idea behind it. So now this story in particular, if I really want to tell, but I've said this before, it's ironically a love story. I didn't expect it to be, but it's about the fear of falling in love just as much as it is about someone trying to kill evil versions of the Knights of the Round, right? And I surprised myself because the villain in the first book is not the villain I expected it to be in the first book.
Oh, fun. So you're a bit of a discovery writer then.
I call myself a planter.
A planter.
I have a general idea where a story goes. Like I know where the story starts, I know where the story ends, usually. But the middle is kind of up in the air, right? Because it's
Okay.
kind of
Yep.
like I've learned this. Usually your characters are more right than you are.
Yep.
Usually. So you have to kind of go with the flow with that, right? Now, this one I've had a little bit more control. I was mentioning Suzy again real quick. I did her inside outline thing. It actually did a really good job of painting a picture.
It's a great
Um,
tool.
yeah. But there were still surprised like during the last couple weeks of writing, like the villain of the story is not quite who I expected it to be. And I
Hmm.
kind of bait and switch the reader a little bit, and I kind of feel bad about it, but I kind of don't because it's going to lead to something better down the road. So I got to make sure it's um one of the characters I introduced so I based Percival, who's the first knight in the story, a little bit off of Rasputin.
Oh, interesting.
I decided if Percival was going to be corrupted, he'd be an evil salesman type, charismatic salesman type that you'd want to punch in the
Okay.
face. And so I essentially made him, and because of the nature of the Holy Grail, I decided to make him an evil genie. Is basically what I did.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, there you go. I decided to make him an evil genie, just based on the concept of what the Holy Grail actually does, right? Which is
Hmm.
right. It's like it kind of grants a wish. Well, Percival is kind of defined by the tragedy of what happened when he discovered the Grail the first time, right? It made him heroic because in fiction he used that to make himself a better person, like kind of like Peter Parker's with great power comes great responsibility is originally a Percival thing, like that literally
Oh,
is.
okay.
Yeah, reading the story of Percival ruined most modern fiction for me. I'm just gonna say that straight up, ruined it. Right, because it pretty much is the basis of most modern, most movies, most books we read have that formula in the story somehow, some way.
Hmm,
So,
interesting.
uh, um, but but the thing is, this idea, it's like okay, so the reason why the knights are evil is because in my version of Camelot, Morgan Le Fay wins. She's laughing. She can see it in her head.
I'm intrigued. I'm very
Yes.
intrigued. Let me know when this book's available.
Yeah, I might try to rope you into baiting it. See?
It's a little bit outside of my usual genre.
I think you'd be okay with it. I would be lying. Have you read Alana Andrews by any chance?
No.
Oh wow. You're a romantic. Yeah, she does. They're a husband and wife romance novelist team. So that
Oh,
I'm
okay.
somewhat basing. I'm somewhat basing one of my. I'm a big Kate Daniels fan. I like which is now that's more their fantasy with a touch of romance than say, uh, romance with a touch of fantasy. But yeah,
Hmm.
no, I definitely, how do I put this? I definitely, yeah, there's definitely a bit of there is a tiny bit of a romance element here. Like I said, I didn't expect that. Like, so when we were talking about like plots and plans, it's like, okay, her mission's simple: kill this evil version of the Knight of the Round, and then life just
Hmm.
gets complicated from there. That's that I like that idea of taking a character that's relatively simple and then just complicating their lives because that they hate
Yeah.
that shit.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, I once heard John Irving speak,
Yeah.
and he spoke about how when he's writing his books, he thinks about, okay, what needs to happen next? What's the worst thing that could happen to this character?
I
Okay, how can I
okay.
make it even worse? And then that's what he writes. And at first I was like, oh, that's so mean. But I'm like, but that's what makes an interesting story, right? Like,
It doesn't. Yeah, the only thing I would say with him is I don't think you always have to make it the worst thing,
well, it
right?
doesn't
But I
necessarily
do
need to be
think I
the
do think,
worst thing,
but
but it needs to be the worst thing for that, whatever they think is the worst. So even if it's like a teenage girl, the worst possible thing is if, the girl that she wants to be friends with, the popular girl, says, ew, gross, go away. That for that character is the worst thing in that moment that could happen, right?
I see. I tend to. I see. I don't always think it has to be the worst. It can be absurd too.
Yes.
It can be
True.
absurd.
And that's what makes it unexpected too, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah, well, okay. So I'm just gonna spoil it a little bit. I set up a punchline in the first chapter, right? And
oh fun.
the punchline is okay. So it's about a bar. It's like legitimately is a shithole. It's based off a little bit of what I've seen in real life, but I embellish it to the nth degree, right? Right. So they fucked up water, like as in a drink of water. They fucked it up somehow, right? And that's the whole punchline. It sets up. I set up like how terrible the beer is, the bar, because you expect all that shit in a bar like this bad. But when you drink the water and the water is even worse than the beer, right? You can you're like I don't even want to know, and
No,
that's
thank you.
the right. And that is the impression when I wrote. I actually read this out loud at When Words Collide. That they did the romance teaming romance thing.
Yeah.
Nancy Bell is officially my hero. Just I'm going to say that. There, and if Nancy ever listens to this, she'll know why. But she's officially my hero. But the thing is, when you look at again, what you want to do is you want like if life is real, bad things happen. Yes, sometimes the worst thing in like the like God stop laughing like kind of thing, right? Is there, but sometimes it's more along the lines of do I put this? It's more along the lines of, okay, what can be the silliest thing? What is the one thing in this situation that you would not expect to deal with? Like I
Yeah.
think about it more in those terms, right?
And I
Sometimes
think that speaks to really the type of book that you're writing, right? Like
yeah,
John
yeah,
Irving writes that really, it's serious, it's heavy fiction. It's something that I don't want to read. That's not something I enjoy
mhm,
reading. Whereas you're writing potentially kind of silly, kind of strange, urban fantasy, like fantasy. It's going to
yeah,
be you're looking for something different. I'm writing romance or rom-com. It can't be super terrible and heavy. Like if the worst thing is someone dying, someone can't die. Like that's not what you're picking this book up for, right? It's the you want those absurd, those worst, those weird things that are going to set that character off
yeah,
on a track that they were not planning on going on, and the reader's going to go, ooh, what's going to happen next? Because that's what keeps the reader turning pages.
yeah. That's not to say that I should say that's not to say that. See, I like occasionally throwing something serious inside a story and a story like
Yes.
this because it adds. So comedy wise, Terry Pratchett's one of my favorite reads, right? And the reason why I like Pratchett so much is because Pratchett has this ability sometimes to say something. I think great comedy says something profound every once in a while,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
right? Pratchett was really good at that.
Yeah.
Sometimes really good at it. Like again, one of my favorite stories is it's called Sorcery or Eric, right? And then
Okay.
it comes off like he makes fun of the whole Percival thing, like the whole Percival saves the day thing. So the dragon wins. And the whole thing's set up like you don't even see the hero come on screen. The hero just goes in, gets his ass whooped, and the dragon wins. But then the book has a legitimate serious moment in there, and it is now that people are sacrificing people to the dragon because the dragon wants them to, and it made people afraid. One of the most profound things like in that I've ever read was in that next moment when I realized like when people are scared, they do terrible things to each other, and they are
Hmm.
capable of it, and they will. And that was from a this is from a comedy book, and
Yep.
that's like right smack dab that ugly little truth is right
Yep.
in there, and you're like, okay,
Yep.
not only is this funny for the most part, I'm not thinking. I'm not thinking about the world. I'm seeing the world in a very that's the thing, right? Like when you're playing with all these expectations with what a reader has, one of the things you gotta look at is okay, can you do the unexpected sometimes is what the reader doesn't always want to see. But can you do it in a way that the reader will be like, I can see why it's here.
Yep. Well, if you look behind me, I have these stacks of romance novels. Almost all of these have been published in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
They deal with issues of abandonment, of anxiety, chronic illness. There's pregnancy loss in a few of them and the traumatic ramifications of that. And yet they're all still funny
Yeah.
and lighthearted for most of it. And they all have emotionally satisfying, happily ever afters, but they still delve into some of these really heavy topics, but they do it in such a way that is unexpected and yet at the same time done with a gentle touch.
Yeah.
And it's delightful. Like they deal with racism and bigotry and misogyny, and yet they're still romance novels and they're light and fluffy reads, but they're not, right? And that's the magic of fiction that's done really well is we can explore these heavier topics in a way that is a lot easier for different types of people depending on what they want or need to then process, right? And go, oh, I didn't think of that, right?
The top left corner of your top right is actually interesting to me because I've interviewed Marissa Mayer and I see you're a big Marissa Mayer fan.
Yes, that's my Marissa Meyer, my Marissa shelf.
Yes, I
I
saw
still
that.
haven't read oh shoot, what's it called? Cursed. I haven't read Cursed or Cursed. I'm
I,
not sure how she pronounces it yet.
I've interviewed her on the show. She's fun.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
she seems like an absolutely delightful human.
No, she's fun. She's really really fun. There is a clip on my YouTube channel because the first time we tried the interview, like everything went wrong
Hmm.
on my end from StreamYard. It
Oh
was
no.
it was me, Marissa Mayer, and my doppelganger on screen at the same time. You can literally watch that clip. It was last time we tried to talk it. It's like this is not how this is supposed to go. She was really gracious though and gave me another shot to interview her. So she's fun. She was a lot of
I'll
fun.
have to look that up.
Yeah. You can
I'm
go
gonna
look
add
up
that
my
to my to-do
YouTube
list.
channel if you want to catch that conversation and also that clip. So there's my shameless cheap plug for the day.
Hey,
But
hey, you got to do it. You got to
oh,
do it.
absolutely, absolutely. But no, like I said, like that's the thing. Like fiction can't be one dimensional, and that's the real secret. I think the whole thing is you can be funny but also profound. You can be
Yep.
happy but also kind of tragic, right? Because
Yep.
life like life isn't just one magical flavor of ice cream. I wish it was sometimes. We all do, but it's not. It's a smorgasbord, right?
Yep.
And there's variety. Like so, the book I'm writing was it's an urban fantasy. That's what it is. I'm gonna it's an urban fantasy, old school pulp, but it's got humor in it. It's got kind of a magic system, kind of, right. It kind of, but it also kind of has a romance story. It has a love story. It's got a bit of a biography aspect of it too. Not mine, but the characters, right? It's not any one thing. It's a bunch of things. And once you realize like that's the real secret, it's about taking the pieces of the stories you're telling, right? And figuring out now if you're a really smart artist, you're going to realize that you're putting yourself in each and every one of these stories.
Hmm.
And that's I think the really tricky part is the really successful artist in period. I don't care who you are, have figured out a way to be vulnerable in the best of ways, in a way that people are receptive to them, right? And I don't care if it's Lana Andrews, I don't care if it's Taylor Swift, I don't care if it's Eminem, I don't care if it's let's pick a comic book person, Raven Gregory. I don't care if it's like Dirk Manning. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter who you are. At some point, you have to put yourself on the page in a way that people can connect to. And if you can do that, you'll find success.
Sure. Well, and
You're right.
I'm writing notes and thoughts.
Oh, making you think?
Well, I'm just thinking, I'm like, that's why so often people get so emotionally attached to books, right?
Yeah.
And if they give a book to someone to read and say, read this, I loved it, and their friend didn't love it, it's crushing, because that person has so often connected to something that author has put into that book, right?
I have a buddy. We have very similar book tastes. Like our book tastes are similar. There are some differences though, right? And we will talk about, but it's not. We figured out that it's not disrespectful, so it never gets to like it's just. For example, and I say this with all respect, I've said this on this show a few times. I think Neil Gaiman's a great author, but I don't connect with him as well as I've connected with other authors. I just don't,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and it's not because he's bad. I can read him and see why people could get him. Like
Yep.
I totally see it. It's just not me right now. I say that, of course, in spite of the fact that right now, I'm reading a Neil Gaiman comic book right now. His comics I connect to more than his novels. I'm not quite sure why exactly, but it just seems to work that way. But even so, like each book's going to hit us differently, right? I can't feel the same thing.
Yep.
Like books like I think of like what makes like these towering best-selling books such a wonderful rare thing is because it's hard to get a book to make everybody that makes everybody feel relatively the same way or relatively in the same ballpark at the very least, right? So whether it's you look at say a Brandon Sanderson novel, or actually I should be perfectly blunt, like if we're talking like the best sellers in fiction, it's the romance genre by a shot. Okay.
Romance readers read fast, and they read a lot, and a lot of romance writers have done a great job of creating interconnected series
Yes.
where readers can jump in at any point in the series and they don't have to read the books in order. But there's always a couple characters that filter through everything. So there's, oh, I want this person's series. I want this person's book. I want this person's book. And it's delightful because if you pick up a book in in a chronological series, if you pick up book 4, you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. But in romance novels, you can pick up book 7 of a 12-book series and you can dive right in. And then you can go back and you can read them all out of order. And they're delightful. And it's so fun because you get to go, oh, I really liked that character when they were, the person in the coffee shop. That was a really fun interaction with them. They have a book of their own. Cool. I want to jump on that. I want to read their story.
Absolutely, right? And that's the whole but again, they're great at that, but I mean it's also like that's probably the most voracious appetite, right?
Yep.
Is the romance genre. And so that's if that's the case, if that's the reality of the situation, then you know what you get, like there's something about what romance does with people that probably connects the most. Now, again, it might be hitting the same emotion, the same base emotion, right? It might maybe it's the characters, maybe it's something else. But that connection is very, very, very pronounced in those genres. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're going for. And the people that do it really, 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 really well, right, find something that connects with them, I think, on the inside. But also something that people like. That I think it's a double combination. It's got to be true to you, but it also has to be like something that everybody can kind of relate to in some way.
Yeah. Well, and that's like every romance novel, well, every novel really has some kind of a point or theme, right? Whether it's really prominent or not, there's some kind of thread going through that this is what this novel is trying to tell us about the world.
Mhm.
And the more cliche you get with those, the easier they are to write on one side, right? To figure it out. But like romance novels, it's very often like love conquers all. Fear, like fear gets in the way of true love and things like that, which so many of those we can all connect with those ideas, those needs to be that need to be loved, that need to be cared for, that need to be seen by the people around us, right? And to be just valued for who we are without having to be something to someone to earn our love, right? And that's what romance novels do. And that's why so many people love to read them, because they leave us with that reminder of I can be who I am.
Yep.
I am lovable as I am, no matter what shit is in my closet that I keep trying to like shove under the bed and ignore. I'm still lovable, and I can still be loved and find love.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's the thing. Like I've learned in this life that sooner or later the shit in the closet has to be dealt with. You can't put it under the blankets forever. Right.
Yes. And that's the other great thing, right? Because in these romance novels, that happily ever after doesn't happen until that shit's been dealt with,
Yeah.
right? And it
But
shows us that we can deal with it, but we're still lovable before that, right?
oh no, yeah. I think. Well, this is something I think just as even as an adult, we realize like I think a part of the journey of life is to find peace with yourself, whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
right? And we all make mistakes, we all do things, and we kind of look at ourselves and go, well, what the fuck? Why did we do it this way, right? Um,
Yeah.
at the same time, it's that willingness to face the things about ourselves we don't love or are uncomfortable with. Those are the moments that kind of define who we are as people. And I don't. That's not even just fiction. I think that's reality. I think at some point in our lives we all have to come face to face with ourselves. And I think the one thing about fiction, the one thing I think fiction in general, doesn't matter what genre does, is for the most part, we can win against ourselves. Sometimes we lose. We won't win every battle, but we can win the war, right? And that's the hope for all of us, I think, at some
Mhm.
point in life, right?
Yeah.
For example, like I've interviewed shit that I can literally say it's over 1,000 people now, and one of the biggest things I've watched with authors in general is that fear of failure, that fear of rejection when they start, but also that fear of success, right? It's dealing with the layers of change. I think the biggest challenge when you do anything like this is if you are serious about going all the way, like making this a living, making this a part of your life, you're gonna have to change. That's just it's the nature of the beast. You got to make decisions on what that looks like for you and how it changes. And nothing wrong with whatever choices you make, but I think encountering this moment, that moment of realization that you've got to change what you're doing, who you are, that is terrifying for a lot of creatives. I feel I think one of the things about the industry today, why the industry in some degree is the way it is um I think there has never really been an open, honest, like come to Jesus point. It's like, hey, listen, if you're serious about doing this, along the way, if you're serious about putting yourself out there, you have to be comfortable being out there. And that means that you're gonna be vulnerable in a way you never anticipated before. Do you really want that?
I feel like that's something that we need to talk about with so many different careers, right? Like how
Yeah.
many people want to be musicians or actors or athletes.
Oh
And
yeah.
in all of those, right, even if it's a very minor level of fame, you still have to put yourself out there, right? And when it comes to creative work, it's that whole other level of, here's this precious thing that I have spent so much time and energy and poured so much of myself into. Read it, and I hope you like it,
Well,
right? Which is just a whole other level of vulnerability. Like, I've worked with people who they want to be a writer and they want to publish, but they've never ever given anyone else the opportunity to read something they've written. And that's the hurdle that we have to get through, is that fear of being seen, and that fear of being seen as a fraud sometimes is also it, or being challenged
that
to
that I feel
reconsider what their art is.
I feel the fraud thing comes later. It comes later. It doesn't really come in the beginning. The beginning is, who's going to want to read my stuff, or who's going to want to see it, depending on what you are, right? I think the fraud. I think where you feel you're a fraud, and I speak from this from like this is because we're dealing with there is imposter syndrome. I feel is when we start to get noticed is when that really pops its head up because
I think that's definitely when it intensifies, but
yeah.
there's also the people who spend all this time and money and energy, and they're like, but then go back and I read back my stuff and I don't think it's any good. So maybe I'm just not any good and I shouldn't even bother with continuing trying to do this. And it's like, no, let's look at this. Let's figure this out, because again, we're our own worst critics. And I feel like that imposter syndrome steps in sometimes at the very beginning, especially for people who, if other things in life have come easily to them and suddenly this doesn't, it's hard. And I was one of those kids where so many things were easy, right? And then suddenly when things aren't, and you're like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't even bother. Maybe I'm no good at this, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was one of those kids too. So I know what you're talking about there. I think, hmm, I'll put it like this. I think with in terms of, let's say, that whole thing, athletes and artists are identical in practically every way, right? Except for like right, the final challenge. So an athlete, athletics is truly a meritocracy. Like it is truly a meritocracy. And there are advantages, like if you're like doing a sport in Canada versus doing a sport in the United States has a lot more tools for an athlete to really develop than here. Not to say it's impossible here, but it's harder, right? I'm just saying, like, it's not every like playing field's level. But there comes a point in this, like, okay, you're doing all the work you can, you're doing all the practicing you can, and you're good. You're really good. But how do you stand up? But like, let's say the NHL, like hockey, because we're Canadian. There's what, 200 athletes maybe in the NHL, maybe 300, something
Yeah,
like
it's not a
that.
lot. It's
Not
not
a
a
lot,
lot.
300 people, maybe 300. Even the worst player in that group is amazing, like unbelievably. I work at a hockey, like I work at the Saddle Dome as my
Oh,
side gig.
okay.
So I get to watch. So it's during like like I'm there before the game starts, and I get to and sometimes so what my favorite thing about watching it is I get to usually see the visiting team more so than the home team. Home team's kind of got their own little private little alcove more the most part, but I get to watch them warm up, like play soccer, do things. I once saw a player from the Philadelphia Flyers doing his hand-eye coordination like exercise with the ball, and then to finish, like himself, he takes the balls and starts juggling just because he could. And just watched him. I watched him for a minute. I actually told him that is legitimately one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. Like it's like okay, like because it was amazing to watch. Right there, like that's a cool part about that's probably the coolest part about my job is I get to see all these like really amazing people. Like sometimes you just run into them in the oddest of spots, and we're all here, so we're all like you can just look and be like amazed.
Mhm.
Um, but for an athlete, might not like that's 300. That guy's really good. He got there. How many people like him? Maybe just an inch or two worse than him are not
Yep.
there. Like athletics is the ultimate meritocracy. That's the biggest difference between athletics and art. Athletics, there's definitely a gap. Art's a harder one to measure, like a much harder one to measure because okay, I may not actually be as talented as you are, but I might sell more. So am I better? Am I luckier? Like that's a harder one.
Yeah.
That's a harder
Did you
one
have
to.
a bigger marketing budget or
Yeah,
better marketing plan, right? Like that's the
yeah,
thing, right? Like
yeah,
art doesn't necessarily sell on its quality
yeah,
always, right?
yeah. That's the thing. Like art's not a meritocracy. Or if it is, it's not the same kind of meritocracy.
It's
Athletics,
so subjective. It's
yeah,
so
yeah,
subjective.
yeah. So that's the big difference between the two. But in every other way, they're the same. In every other way, because you're doing the practice, the discipline, the work, whatever that looks like for your
Mhm.
discipline. And that's it. It takes incredible discipline, self-sacrifice. And what if you're not good enough? Like what if it doesn't work? Right? That's a terrifying thought. Like that is a very terrifying thought. And then it works, right? Then it or because you feel like so maybe there I can see what you're saying, maybe feeling like a fraud a little bit there, right? Was it for nothing? No, it's just it's life's just a cruel and unfair place sometimes. You can be great. If you're an athlete, there might just be somebody better, and that sucks. Or maybe you get injured at the wrong time. If you're an artist, you might not catch on at the right time. Timing has a lot to do with it as well.
Mhm.
Um, the right timing, and suddenly you're in a stratosphere you've never imagined. Then again, maybe that book you wrote 20 years ago, suddenly one day someone picks it up. It's like, holy shit, this is the most amazing thing ever. And you're like, why couldn't you have done this 20 years ago? Right. But that's the one thing arts does have over athletics is there's no time until when a work can become successful.
Mhm.
But so much of that, there's a little bit of luck and timing with that as
Oh,
well.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that as writers we have to keep in mind, right? Like we are writing this thing because we have a story that we want to tell. And if we want to get it on, we want to see it on bookshelves, we want to hear people talking and know that people enjoy it, that's awesome. But the accomplishment in is having written the book,
Mm-hmm.
right? And having created, that's the accomplishment. Everything else is awesome and extra if it can happen, especially if you want to be able to pay your bills with it. But that's a whole other part of the writing journey, is actually like going through the publishing and the marketing and selling. Like when you talk to people, whether or not they're traditionally or indie published, being an author is a business. There's writing and then there's book selling.
Yep.
And it's two different jobs, which I think is also something that so many people who are trying to get into writing and publishing, they don't quite understand that
No.
if you want your book on that bestseller shelf at Chapters or Barnes and Noble or Target, you have to actually do two different jobs. You have to write the book and then you have to get it out there and tell people about it and talk about it. And that's a whole other hard thing with a whole other level of imposter syndrome.
Well, yeah. It's like, please buy my book, and it's like, so you want to talk about ultimate imposter syndrome? The first time I had to sell my books, like the first time I really learned how to sell my books, was in Phoenix, Arizona. So Phoenix had this has this event called First Friday, or at least they did, where artists in all over the city would gather like a bunch of blocks. It's not like First Friday here. There, it's like a giant show. Like it's just so much is
Cool.
out there. Oh, it's night and day, so much bigger. A lot of people diss the States, but the one thing the United States does better than Canada by a significant margin is they know how to put people on a platform to go out there. Like they get that so well. It's the one thing the Americans do better than anybody else. Period. And right, it's the so first night I'm out there, I wasn't ready. I didn't have proper equipment, so I just wasn't like just even a table. You need a table for that. So next time I get a table, go out there, put my so I put my books down. So beside me are some of the most amazing pieces of art I've ever seen in my life. Like some of them just phenomenal. One month I was there beside like stained glass windows, some of the most beautiful stained glass windows you've ever seen, and a
Very cool.
concert, and legitimately a concert was right beside me. I'm just like, so I had to learn very quickly to talk. Like I have a big mouth.
Yes.
I have a big mouth. It's a skill. I'm proud of it. I've even gotten awards for it. So I have a big mouth. It serves so well. Like the hardest thing is like like I say it. I say this in like the most loving way. Artists have to get over themselves in the sense that okay, you are selling a product. Whether you like to admit it or not, you are selling a product. The product, truthfully, is you. But
Oh,
the way,
100%.
but the other part of that is the other part of that is um it's the work you have that is going to bring people to you. So when I say it like that so that people get the basic idea, it's like the book you're selling right now is your current way of supporting you, which is you're the product, this is their current way, and you have to constantly update that. And that's always a challenge. Whether it's a podcast like myself, or a book I've written, or a book you've written, or a coaching sale you have, or a way to recruit people, like you can't stand pat, but you got to get over the fact that, well, if you don't say anything and you're the one that I'm supposed to care about, well, you're the one that you're supposed to care about you the most. If you're not going to stand up for yourself, no one else is gonna. That's just the way it is. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the hardest lesson, but it's also the truest one. And once you understand that, you can sell. You're actually ready to sell.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a hard lesson for a lot of people to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because so often we are told not to bother other people, not to, you know, talk about ourselves too much, right? And just realizing that no, like I am the product to sell and I'm worth it.
I'm a big professional wrestling fan. Like I'm a big one. And my favorite stuff, my legitimately my favorite stuff is like the old interviews back in the 80s. Like that, like so not so much the wrestling. The wrestling's better today. But the so me and Gene Okerlund would have a microphone. He'd be interviewing these guys about their match at this, because back then they would try to get people to come to the arenas and pay to watch these guys wrestle. That was the business model back then. So these guys would be like, and some of these guys were really good. Like my favorite all time was Macho Man Randy Savage. Everybody knows who that guy is. It's like he's almost like right. And but he was doing this stuff back in the 80s, and you watch what he was doing, and you were just like, this is the most absurd shit I've ever seen. But he made no apologies about it, right? And he talked hundreds of thousands, millions of people to go into the arena to watch him do his thing, right? That's how he made money. You can't you have to be unapologetic about the fact that you know what this is like. You have to have enough of an ego to go, hey, I do matter. The work I do matters. I'm worth something, and I have to go out there and I have to say it. Now, I'm not saying you dress up like they did and do it. I mean, if you're comfortable with that, go for it. I mean, you gotta
Yeah.
decide what that looks like for you. But you can't be afraid to just go out there and say, "Here I am." And I mean, when I made the decision to make this like my main source of income and living, I threw away my quote unquote my dignity, in the sense that I have no problem talking about myself. Maybe a little too much sometimes, right? But for what I'm doing, it's better that than not saying anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because very rarely does a talent exist that will be enough.
Yeah. Well, and it's being open to, like, in whatever it is you're creating, whatever it is you're selling, we all need to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And just because we're making something that is creative, a book, a podcast, poetry, artwork, whatever it is that we're creating, just because it's creative and maybe it's something that we enjoy, doesn't mean that we don't deserve to be paid for the work that we're doing, because it is work, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Even talking to people on podcasts, doing all the arranging, getting it up there, telling people about it, that's work, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so many people, like everybody knows we all need money, right? Like, let's throw out this like concept of we can't talk about money. Everybody needs money. We all gotta buy groceries. We all gotta buy, roofs over our heads. So stop it and let's just exchange the money we have and buy the services and the creative stuff that we have so that people can keep creating. Because if we don't pay our creators, if creators don't ask for money for compensation for the creating they're doing, guess what? We're not going to be able to keep creating.
I've actually and that leads to the other big and wonderful thing. See, I no longer care about being published. I want to say it like this. I don't care about prestige.
Mm-hmm.
Like that kind of ego stroke, I have completely tried to eliminate from my life.
Okay.
Right? Now, I want to be paid for what I do. There's a difference, right? That's a completely different ego stroke, right? But the thing is, I realize, like, for me, right, awards are nice. Being in cool places is nice. How much? Right? That's really, like, it might sound very callous, but one of the things I say it like this. One of the biggest compliments you can give somebody is to pay them for their work.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
literally the biggest compliment you can give somebody. It's one of them. It's definitely, I would say, in the top 3, right? There are a couple other ones depending on the connection you have with the individual that are bigger, but that one, like, as far as like stranger, that's the biggest one, the biggest compliments you can get. I do not mind that my work. I don't mind prestige, but I feel that's more of a byproduct of what I'm doing.
That's not the goal. That's not why you're creating.
Yeah.
Right? It's not why you're doing what you're doing is to try and get prestige and become famous. No, it's because you love the work that you're doing and the stories that you're telling, and you know the value that you are creating and giving into the world, right?
Yep. And I just look at any of that stuff as a byproduct of what I'm doing, not the goal of what I'm doing. I think that's the other thing too. A lot of authors get that mixed up, right? It's not about the prestige of writing. Like, I I would love to be on the New York Times bestselling list. I'm not going to
Yeah.
lie to you.
But if that's your only goal, you're probably going to end up being disappointed.
Yeah. And also, I'm probably, and I'm also, there, I mean, there are some really easy ways to accomplish it. I want to be paid for it. That's the other thing, too. Like, I'm like, if I'm getting what I feel I'm worth, and let's say it's for a publishing house, they're getting what they're worth, that'll come, right? Or I'll be so, or even better, I don't need any of that stuff to do well. That's even the bigger dream, right? Like, all that other stuff is nice, but the idea of I'm doing what I love, and I'm getting paid for it, that is the ultimate high. I mean, talk about that. I mean, talk about the ultimate self-affirming, self-effacing. Like again, folks, I'm not gonna lie. I have a big ego, but I need one. Right. And I say it like that because if I did not think I was worth something, I would never be doing this. I would never be making the money I'm making today doing what I'm doing. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens because I have the confidence to go out there and get it. That's it. It sounds simple, but it's not always simple. But I mean, it's not easy, I should say. It is simple, but it's not easy. You have, again, at the end of the day, this is very much a game of self-belief. It very much is. You're a book coach. Tangibly speaking, right? You're basically, I'll make your stories better. But there are some people who will listen to that and go, I don't know if I need you. And you're like, okay. You got the confidence to go, okay, that's cool. Have a good one.
Well, my job isn't necessarily to make your story better. Mine is to help you make your story match what it is in your head. My job is to help my writers actually get that story down instead of being like, I want to write and then not doing it. Right? Because everything else gets in the way. But when you've paid for someone to help you and they're sitting there asking you questions and helping you, forcing you to kind of dig into, okay, this is your story you're telling. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Why is this important? Why is this character doing this? Why is this character saying this? Why are you telling this story? let's dig into that. Let's talk about it. And then your story gets those layers and that depth that makes it into this incredible story that you had in the back of your head, but you hadn't been able to get it out. And I help my clients get it out and get it down onto the page so that the rest of us can read it. And that's what's so fun, right? And I get to encourage my clients and give them that confidence that this is worth their time, that their story is worth sharing. And it's so fun to see when those light bulbs go on and when they get excited about the story again after getting discouraged.
And that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the best job ever, I gotta say. I love my job.
Yeah. But I mean, you didn't get there overnight. And the hard thing was, like, again, probably convincing yourself more than even convincing other people that you could.
Oh yeah, like I started freelancing, working with other authors 6-8 years ago. I don't even know how long. And it was, a project here, a project there, and slowly figuring it out and trying to figure out what are my skills? What really do I have to offer these clients, these authors? How can I help them? And it took me all this time until just the last like 6-8 months before I finally started to really figure it out.
Oh,
And I'm still figuring it out, really, but I finally kind of narrowed in more on what it is so that I can really help people make their dreams come true, get those stories down. And it's delightful. Like one of my clients, I worked with her in February, and in July she signed with a literary agent who is like such a perfect fit for her. And this agent has the most amazing vision for her book. And I am so excited. Like I have no doubt that in the next 6 months, that book is going to sell to a big 5 publisher. I have no doubt. And I'm so excited that I got to be just a tiny little part of that.
And that's the goal, right? That's the goal. But ultimately, like, again, it was the confidence click, right? You figuring out your skill set. Like me, like where I'm at in my freelance career, I can do a little bit of everything, right? Right. I write. I make an ass of myself. I'm good at that, as you can tell. And but I also been drawing, doing commission work. I'm trying some stuff. I'm just like, but again, narrowing my focus is just like I've been trying to get into advertising, but for whatever reason, that's been hard. It's like people are like, I don't want to deal with selling my books, but you kind of have to. But but again, that's where I'm at, like convincing people the value of the work, right? More than anything else. But I also realize like my niche seems to be this, like everything else, everything I'm doing, everything extending from that has been a result of this.
Yeah. So. Well, and that's part of freelancing, part of creating as well. And it's iterative, right? You just keep trying different things until you figure out, okay, what works. Yeah. And then if it stops working, you try something else, and you just keep trying to figure out, what do you enjoy? What works? What provides value? What brings in income? What, fits in this circle of, I love doing it. It brings in the income I need to pay my bills, and it provides the value that other people need. Like, and when you can find that thing that's in the middle, right, that covers all of those, it's delightful, but it takes time and work to get there.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm still working for the Flames, ladies and gentlemen. At least it's the secondary income, not the primary one. So,
well, that's the thing, right? Like having those layers of recognizing that, some things are going to be primary and some things are going to be secondary, and that's okay. It doesn't mean one is more important than the other. It's just having that clear understanding of which one needs to be prioritized right now, right?
Well, yeah, like for me right now, I'm trying to get ready for like taking my show officially on the road.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. Well, that means I may have to actually go back and do a day. Like we'll see how things work out. I'm really torn because for me it's like I could go get a day job and I know I could get the money up real quick that way. But I don't actually know if it's the healthy. See, here's my challenge, right? I'm on the road. I'm going to like it'd be much better if I could literally get to the freelance equivalent of making money at will, right? Using my skills to get myself trade. Well, if I'm working a full-time job, right? If I'm working a full-time job, um, I'm not improving those skills. So when the money runs out on the road, what happens? Right? I'm gonna have to stop, park somewhere, and work. I can, and that might still happen from time to time anyway. But I don't mind that if it's once in a while.
But that's
But
not the dream to be doing that regularly.
no, 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 no. So the dream is okay. I use my big mouth, my creative skills to make money while I'm on the road. That way I don't really have to worry about it. So if I decide that I want to be in, say, Hawaii, maybe not right this minute, but it won't be that way ever forever, right? Say I'm in Hawaii, well, then I can be in Hawaii. Or say I'm in San Diego, I'm like, I can be in San Diego. Or if I want to be in Vancouver, I can be in Vancouver, although probably not Vancouver. Maybe Kelowna, but right, maybe Kelowna, but she's laughing. But
Hey, I love both Vancouver and Kelowna, so I'll be in
I,
either.
I've lived in Vancouver. I like visiting Vancouver. Vancouver is a
Yeah.
great place to visit. I don't know, but I wouldn't live there twice. I've done it. I wouldn't do it again. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I lived in the Lower Mainland, not right in Vancouver, but my brother lives in North Van.
Okay.
So I've been there.
Yeah.
North Van's lovely.
No, the North Van is very lovely. Very, very lovely. I really liked it. I lived right near downtown. So
Okay, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's a busy place to be.
Well, it wasn't bad. Okay, so I'm talking about Vancouver real quick. I'm not gonna say it too. Anybody not from born and raised in the city that was coming in like I was just trying to do their thing, that I got them. The people that have been there for a certain amount of time, eh, it was different. We'll just leave it at that. It was different. It was like I think you've not seen the rest of the world somehow. I
I
don't know.
feel like in some ways, Vancouver, Toronto, and New York are all very similar in that way. Of the
Yes.
people who are born and raised there, see that city as the center of the world.
Hmm.
And it's pretty funny when you are not one of those people and they don't get it. They just don't understand why you would ever want to be anywhere else.
That was part of it. I will say this: Vancouver maybe veered a little bit more on the eccentric side instead. Toronto, I've lived in Toronto too.
Oh yeah, Toronto's definitely less eccentric than Vancouver. Yes,
Yeah,
I've also lived in Toronto.
yeah, yeah, yeah. How to put this? Toronto's more intense than Vancouver is. That would be the way I would describe it. Um, I felt you can feel Toronto from like an hour away. Like you can just feel that city. Like even if you're just an hour around it, you can feel it. Can't do that with Vancouver, which is good. I actually think that's a good thing. I lived in Detroit as well. Detroit feels more chill than Toronto does, and
Yeah.
that's
Oh yeah, I could see that.
right. Yeah, you're like, yep. Not even gonna like. Some people will hear me say that and they go, "Really?" It's like, yeah, no, 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 really. Like, yeah, Detroit's got a dark side, but it's not. It's chill in
Yeah.
comparison.
Toronto's not chill at all. No,
No, no, you have. It
no.
takes a certain like. Again, I don't mind visiting it. Like visiting the city.
I I loved it. There was parts of Toronto that I absolutely loved, but it was so far. Like my family is all over here. My family's in Alberta. My family's in BC. And so it was too far away. And there
Yep.
was so much concrete. And like I grew up in Alberta where we have big sky and we have fields and we have green.
And
You didn't get
mountains.
that in Toronto. In
No,
Toronto, you can't see the sky half the time. There's concrete everywhere. And I didn't love it.
yeah, and if you're one of the poor areas of the city, you get treated accordingly, and that's the unfortunate truth about that city. But no, that's the thing, right? Like they all those three cities. I'm sure LA fits in this category as well. As like they're unique little bottles, but people go there because they're things they need to go, and that's
Yep.
great. And it works out great for some people. Now that all said, like I said, for me in my travels, I do see myself probably eventually ending up in some kind of small town,
Mm-hmm.
like somewhere in the middle, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. I don't know where exactly, but that's kind of how I see it. because I kind of come to the point, like one of the other reasons I'm doing this, like I'm leaving the Twitch era here, is I don't mind being on the computer. I don't want to be on it quite as much. There's a lot of life and magic out in the world. I kind of want to be a part of
Mhm.
it for a little while.
Yeah,
If that makes
that
sense.
makes sense. Well, and the thing is too, you can always come back,
Yeah.
right?
I,
If you realize you don't want to be out in the real world, you can come back.
yeah. I don't know if I'm gonna come back living. The nail in the coffin for me, honestly, was San Diego. I went to San Diego Comic Con like this year, right before I went to
Okay.
When Worlds
Yep.
Collide. Even ignoring the con, like we just ignore the con, because con's like a special occasion. I had more human interaction in San Diego in like a week than Calgary in a year. Like,
That's Calgary is a very insular city. We all stay in our homes. We don't go out and interact with people all that much.
yeah, and I just realized like that to me at this point's a death knell. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not where I am in my life. Now, maybe when I'm 60, I'm not, all right. I'll be that old man yelling at crowds and to get off my lawn. Like, yeah, I maybe, maybe not. I don't think so.
Maybe, I picture you more as the guy who's out there handing out water balloons to all the kids and encouraging them to go get in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. I joke I'll probably be a supervillain by the time I'm 50. I'll have an obnoxious red cape. I won't talk to myself in the third person. I may not. I won't go quite that far, but I may have someone carrying my obnoxious cape around wherever I go. It's like that.
Ooh, I like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've always been a sucker for this. Like, have you ever seen the character Spawn?
I don't think so.
Oh, just Google,
Let me
like,
Google this.
look up Spawn, Todd McFarlane's Spawn, and look at his cape, and look at how obnoxious it is. Because it's actually obnoxious. She can see it.
I'm just like scrolling through all of these photos. This is hilarious.
There's no practical use
Well,
for that cape.
It's like the part of it goes up to here.
Yeah.
And then like, what?
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't
Oh.
like.
Yeah,
It's
you'd need like a handful of folks like helping you carry it.
yeah, because there's no way I could walk in that. But it would be
No.
hilarious to wear. It would be absolutely hilarious to wear. And
There you go, Josh. It's something that you need to aspire to. There
exactly, a super villain at the yeah. And I think the hilarious part is you could actually picture it.
you go. Yeah, I can picture you in it.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
having like two minions, a minion or two, just carrying it behind. It's like, why are you carrying it? Because and they're like, can't walk on. Why is he wearing it? Because look how silly this is.
How magnificent he looks.
That's right. That's right. I'm compensating for something. I don't know what. So, going full circle here before we wrap up here. So you're planning on having a book come out?
The goal is to at some point get this thing finished. I've been working on it on and off for about 4 years.
Okay.
It's gone through a lot of transformation, especially this year.
Okay.
But I think I finally kind of got it on a track, figuring it out. The goal is to have a solid, completed draft by the end of the year.
Okay.
So that next year can be, revisions, but it should be pretty solid. So not too many revisions, hopefully. And then I'd love to try the traditional track, just because that's what I've known about and seen my whole life, right? I love the idea of that.
Yeah.
So I just want to try it. We'll see what happens and then decide whether or not, if that doesn't happen, if I want to go the indie route and figure out how to get it out into the world by myself. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm gonna ask a big question. What was the challenge? Like you said, it took you 4 years. What was your biggest struggle?
Well, biggest struggle is just everything else going on in life.
Okay.
We've had a lot of ups and downs in the last years. So it was just writing had to take a backseat to life, and that's okay. And now I'm figuring out how to integrate it back into my life. But it's getting there.
Without dwelling into too many details, is it all like the pandemic related insanity, or is it just a bunch of
No. My husband and I decided we wanted to grow our family and have some kids. And then we went through multiple miscarriages, a stillbirth, 2 years of infertility, fertility treatments, And then I finally got pregnant with my daughter, and then had, the gong show of a high risk pregnancy after loss, and then also having a newborn. So all of that happened in about 6 years.
Okay, no, okay.
Then throw the pandemic in there as well. That was just extra.
Okay, no, I'm asking like that because like I just want to make sure. I'm glad you made it through the other side. Some of that sounded quite brutal, right?
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was quite brutal. Glad you got through to the other side and you didn't quit. No, because I think the last thing we'll touch on and we'll wrap up is this: what you want ultimately at the end of the day is the important thing. And what I mean by that is, I mentioned there's 3 categories of writer for me, and right, published, non-published, for you. But for me, it's like writing for passion, writing for like this goal, like writing for a particular goal. Um, you gotta be, again, understanding that also we can all be at different parts of that tree at different points in our lives. And I say it like that because in this particular case, that sounds like what happened to you. It's just like I had other things I'd wanted to do, I wanted to accomplish first. And then this was secondary to that.
Well, and there's also just and so I work with this with my clients as well, is sometimes life stuff has to come before your art. Yep. Sometimes that you only have so much energy to give, right? And you have to choose where you can give it. And grief, anyone who's been through grief is a beast. Yes. And grief does this, right? So when grief was up here, writing couldn't happen. When grief was down here, I had the energy to write. Mm-hmm. And then grief, right? And that's the journey. And it's okay. And one day I'm going to see my book on a bookshelf in a bookstore, and it's going to be delightful.
Man, I don't know if I actually want to say this on the air or not. I'll say this off the air because there is something I wanted to say in regards to everything you went through. So, I've talked about I feel like that in itself is a deep conversation. We've already gone over an hour. I think going into some of what you've been through could take easily another hour. I don't know if either of us have the time for that today.
Unfortunately, I think my daughter's already waking up, so I'm gonna have to go get her.
Yeah, exactly. So we should plug something before you go. Like, sure. What do you want to plug? What do you want to plug?
Plug my Instagram if you're interested in romance novels.
Sure.
My Instagram is just at Trisha Jenn Reads.
Yes.
So I share there about the romance novels I'm reading. I share tips for writing romance or writing authentic characters or just writing, period. Encouragement for writers. I have my info on subscribing to my newsletter there or my weekly writing goals service that you can sign up for just $12 a month. Get a couple emails a week with some encouragement and a prompt to set your goal. And at the end of the week, if you let me know how that went and whether or not you met your goal, you get entered into a draw to win free feedback on your pages.
Mm-hmm. All right. And that will do it, folks. I will be back here Thursday for sure. My guest is Marthias Ray. I'm doing a drink and draw, one of my last ones on this. Well, that's a debate. I'm debating whether or not to keep, I don't know what to do with the Twitch channel now as this is over, coming to an end. I don't know whether if I should do games every so often or I gotta figure that shit out. But Marthias Wade and Jag Tress, who commented earlier, is going to be my guest Friday. As again, folks, we are coming to the end of this era. I'm going to thank Tris, the last member of the Suzy Four. So I'm going to say, so for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. Stay inspired, keep shining in the dark. And I'll see you next time.